The sound of Lydia whispering into her phone at midnight wasn't what woke me up. It was the way she said my name like it tasted bad in her mouth. "Don't worry about Gray," she breathed into the receiver, thinking I was asleep. "He's too stupid to notice anything. The man can barely tie his own shoes without instructions." I lay there in our king-sized bed, the one I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary, listening to my wife of 12 years talk about me like I was some kind of defective appliance. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, Graham Gray Delaney, the guy who could rebuild a transmission blindfolded, being called too stupid to notice his own wife cheating on him. But here's the thing about being underestimated your whole life. You get really good at letting people think they're smarter than you. And right now, lying in the dark, listening to Lydia plan God knows what with whoever was on the other end of that line, I was already 3 steps ahead of her. "Tomorrow night should work perfectly," she continued, her voice getting that breathy quality I hadn't heard directed at me in months. "Gray's always dead to the world by 9. We'll have hours." Hours for what, exactly? I had a pretty good idea, but I've learned that assumptions make you sloppy. Facts, on the other hand, facts are bulletproof. When she finally hung up and slipped back into bed, I waited exactly 17 minutes, long enough for her breathing to settle into that fake sleep rhythm she thought fooled me, before I got up and padded to the kitchen. Our joint bank account statements were always scattered across the counter, mixed in with her advertising agency's expense reports and my auto shop's invoices. What I found made my blood run cold, then hot, then cold again. 3 withdrawals from our savings account in the past month, each one for exactly $347. Each one made at the First National ATM on Harbor Street, right next to the Pine Lake Resort. The same resort where we'd spent our honeymoon, back when Lydia still looked at me like I hung the moon instead of like I was something stuck to her shoe. I stood there in my boxer shorts and old army t-shirt, holding those bank statements, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not heartbreak. That would come later. This was something colder, more calculating. This was the feeling I used to get in Afghanistan when I realized the friendly local who'd been bringing us intel was actually feeding information to the other side. This was the moment I stopped being Gray the disappointment and started becoming someone else entirely. The next morning, Lydia was up and dressed before I even got out of the shower. She stood at our bathroom mirror applying lipstick, the expensive kind she saved for special occasions, and humming some tune I didn't recognize. "You're up early," I said, toweling off my hair. "Big presentation today," she replied without looking at me. "Might be late getting home." "Don't wait up." "What kind of presentation?" For just a second, her hand paused on the lipstick tube. "New client. Very important. Brent thinks—" She caught herself. "My boss thinks this could be huge for the agency." Brent, now we were getting somewhere. "Brent Mallory, right? The new creative director?" I kept my voice casual, like I was just making conversation. "Heard he drives one of those fancy Teslas." Lydia's reflection met my eyes in the mirror, and I saw something flicker there. Surprise? Guilt? Fear? "How do you know about Brent's car?" "Small town, honey. Word gets around." I smiled at her, the same easygoing smile that had convinced her to marry me all those years ago. Plus, Mrs. Pine mentioned seeing it parked at the agency pretty late a few nights ago. Said it was there past midnight. The color drained from Lydia's face so fast, I thought she might faint. But she recovered quickly. I had to give her credit for that. "He's very dedicated to his work," she said, capping the lipstick with more force than necessary. "We all are." "I'm sure you are." After she left, I called my shop and told Marty, my lead mechanic, that I'd be in late. Marty Kowalski had been with me since I opened Gray's Auto Body 5 years ago, and he was the kind of guy who could read people like repair manuals. If anyone would have insights into what was happening in my marriage, it would be him. "Boss, you sound like hell," Marty said when I walked into the shop around noon. He was elbow deep in the engine of a '98 Chevy, but he straightened up when he saw my face. "What's eating you?" I told him everything. The phone call, the bank statements, the mysterious Brent with his Tesla, and his late-night dedication to work. Marty listened without interrupting, occasionally wiping his hands on a greasy rag and nodding. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You want to know what I think? That's why I'm here. I think you already know what's going on, and you're just looking for someone to confirm it." He tossed the rag onto his workbench and looked me straight in the eye. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" That evening, I decided to do a little reconnaissance of my own. The Pine Lake Resort sits on 40 acres of prime real estate about 15 minutes outside town. It's the kind of place where rich people from Boston come to pretend they're roughing it in the wilderness, complete with overpriced cabins that have better amenities than most people's homes. I parked my truck behind a stand of pine trees that gave me a clear view of the main lodge and waited. At 7:43 p.m., a silver Tesla Model S pulled into the circular driveway. Even from a distance, I could see the vanity plate, CREATIVE1. Subtle. Brent Mallory stepped out of the car, and I got my first good look at Lydia's new boss. Mid-30s, tall, wearing the kind of casual expensive clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He had that polished look that screamed, "I peaked in college and never got over it." At 8:15, a familiar blue Honda Civic pulled up behind the Tesla. My wife stepped out, and even from 200 yards away, I could see she was wearing the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she claimed was too fancy to wear to dinner with me. They didn't embrace in the parking lot, too public, too risky, but the way they walked toward the lodge, the careful distance they maintained that somehow seemed more intimate than touching, told me everything I needed to know. I sat in my truck for another hour, watching the lights in what I assumed was their room, feeling something cold and hard settle in my stomach. When I finally drove home, I had a plan. The next morning, while Lydia was in the shower, I did something I'd never done in 12 years of marriage. I went through her purse. What I found was a hotel keycard with Pine Lake Resort printed on it and a receipt from yesterday evening. Room 247, 2 guests, champagne service. Total, $347. The same amount as those mysterious ATM withdrawals. I photographed everything with my phone, put it all back exactly where I'd found it, and went to make coffee like nothing had happened. "You're in a good mood this morning," Lydia said when she came down for breakfast. She was wearing her favorite power suit, the navy blue one that made her look like she could run a Fortune 500 company. Why shouldn't I be? Beautiful wife, successful business, life is good. I handed her a cup of coffee, black with 2 sugars, exactly how she'd taken it for 12 years. "Speaking of which, how did that presentation go yesterday?" "Really well. Brent was very pleased with my work." "I'll bet he was." Something in my tone made her look at me sharply, but I was already turning away, busying myself with scrambling eggs that neither of us would eat. That afternoon, I paid a visit to Radio Shack and bought a small digital recorder, the kind private investigators use, according to the pimply-faced kid who sold it to me. Then I stopped by Best Buy and picked up a dash cam. Nothing fancy, just something that would give me clear video and audio of whatever happened in Lydia's car. Installing it took about 10 minutes. I tucked it behind her rearview mirror where it would be practically invisible, unless you knew what to look for. The beauty of being married to someone who thinks you're stupid is that they never expect you to be capable of anything clever. My phone rang while I was testing the camera's angle. "Gray's Auto Body, this is Gray." "Mr. Delaney? This is Kelsey Morrison from Lydia's office. I was wondering if I could speak with you about something. Privately." Kelsey Morrison. I knew the name. Lydia had mentioned her a few times, usually in the context of complaining about how the younger woman was trying too hard and didn't understand the creative process, which, translated from Lydia speak, probably meant Kelsey was good at her job and represented competition. "What can I do for you, Miss Morrison?" "I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Could we meet somewhere, maybe for coffee?" We agreed to meet at Dunkin' Donuts on Main Street at 6 o'clock. I spent the rest of the afternoon wondering what Lydia's coworker wanted to discuss that required privacy and secrecy. Kelsey Morrison turned out to be a petite brunette in her late 20s with the kind of sharp intelligence that showed in her eyes. She was already sitting in a corner booth when I arrived, nursing a large coffee and looking nervous. "Mr. Delaney, thank you for meeting me. I wasn't sure you'd come. Call me Gray. And I have to admit, I'm curious about what this is regarding." She took a deep breath, like someone about to jump off a high dive. "It's about Lydia and Brent Mallory." My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. "What about them?" "They're having an affair. Have been for about 2 months now." She said it quickly, like ripping off a Band-Aid. "I thought you should know." I sat back in the booth, processing this confirmation of what I already suspected. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's not fair." "To you, I mean." Kelsey wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm herself. "And because they're using company resources to fund their little romance. Expense accounts, company credit cards, even having the agency pay for their hotel rooms by claiming their client meetings. That's quite an accusation." "It's not an accusation, it's a fact. I handle the expense reports, Mr. Delaney. Gray, I see everything that goes through our books." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. 3 weeks ago, Brent put a weekend at the Pine Lake Resort on his company card. Claimed it was a retreat with a potential client. But I know for a fact that Lydia was there too, because she submitted a spa charge from the same weekend on her expense report. The pieces were falling into place with mechanical precision. "Why are you really telling me this, Kelsey?" She had the grace to look embarrassed. "Because Brent's been making moves to restructure the creative department. Word is, he wants to bring in his own people, which means some of us are going to be out of a job, and Lydia's been helping him identify who should stay and who should go. And you're on the go list. Top of it, apparently." She pulled a manila folder from her purse and slid it across the table. "Everything's in there. Receipts, photos, email printouts. I made copies of everything before I decided to come to you." I opened the folder and felt my world tilt sideways. There were dozens of documents. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, even a receipt from Victoria's Secret that made my stomach turn. But it was the photos that really got to me. Lydia and Brent at various restaurants around town, holding hands across candlelit tables. Lydia and Brent in the parking lot of the Pine Lake Resort, locked in an embrace that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. When were these taken? Over the past month, I hired a private investigator with my own money. Kelsey's voice was bitter. Figured if I was going to lose my job anyway, I might as well go down swinging. I closed the folder and looked at this young woman who'd just handed me enough ammunition to destroy my marriage and possibly Lydia's career. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing." Well, that's not entirely true. If this information happens to cause problems for Brent's restructuring plans, I wouldn't be upset about that. "And if I decide to do nothing with this information?" Kelsey shrugged. "Then you do nothing. But at least you'll know the truth." I took the folder and stood up. "Thank you, Kelsey. This couldn't have been easy." No, it wasn't. But it was the right thing to do. Walking back to my truck, I felt like I was carrying a bomb instead of a manila folder. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and devastating. But it was also exactly what I needed to move to the next phase of my plan. That night, Lydia came home at almost 11 o'clock, claiming she'd been working late on the big presentation again. She smelled like expensive cologne, not the kind I wore, and her lipstick was freshly applied. "How was your day?" she asked, kicking off her heels and heading straight for the stairs. "Educational," I replied. "Very educational." The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day setting up what I privately thought of as my surveillance network. The dash cam in Lydia's car was just the beginning. I positioned a small digital recorder in our bedroom, hidden inside an old clock radio that hadn't worked in years, but that Lydia insisted on keeping for sentimental reasons. Another recorder went into her home office, tucked behind a stack of advertising magazines she never read but liked to display. By noon, I had audio coverage of every room where Lydia might take a private phone call, plus video surveillance of her car. If she was planning something, I'd know about it. The first payoff came that very afternoon. I was at the shop, pretending to focus on rebuilding the engine of a 2003 Ford Explorer when my phone buzzed with a text alert. The dash cam in Lydia's car was motion activated and connected to my phone via a mobile app. Someone had just gotten into her Honda. I opened the app and watched in real time as Brent Mallory settled into my wife's passenger seat. The audio quality was crystal clear. "Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Brent's voice came through my phone's speaker. "Gray, please. The man thinks surveillance is something you do to your oil pressure." Lydia's laugh was sharp and cruel. "He's been the same boring, predictable loser since the day I married him. No imagination, no ambition, no clue. Still, maybe we should be more careful." That scene at the resort yesterday was risky. What scene? We had lunch and went to our room. It's not like we were making out in the lobby. Your husband could hire a private investigator. With what money? Half of everything he makes goes into that pathetic garage of his, and the other half goes to beer and truck payments. The contempt in her voice was like acid. Besides, even if he did suspect something, what's he going to do? Gray doesn't have the spine for confrontation. He'll just sulk and drink beer and pretend everything's fine like he always does. If you're sure. I'm sure. Trust me, I know my husband. He's completely harmless. Harmless. That word echoed in my head as I watched them drive away, probably heading to another afternoon at the Pine Lake Resort on the company's dime. Harmless. We'd see about that. That evening, I had dinner waiting when Lydia got home. Her favorite meal, grilled salmon, asparagus, and wild rice. I'd even opened a bottle of the expensive wine she liked, the kind we usually saved for special occasions. "What's all this?" she asked, looking suspicious. "Can't a man cook dinner for his wife without having an ulterior motive?" "You can, but you usually don't." She sat down across from me, still wearing her work clothes. "Did something happen? Are you in some kind of trouble?" "Why would you think that?" "Because the last time you made this much effort, you'd wrecked my car backing out of the driveway." I laughed, and it sounded genuine even to me. "No wrecked cars, no trouble. I just realized I haven't been paying enough attention to you lately. To us." Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. But she recovered quickly. "That's sweet, Gray." "Really?" She took a sip of wine. "But you don't need to worry about us." "We're fine." "Are we?" "Of course we are. Why would you ask that?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. 12 years of marriage had taught me to read her expressions like a mechanic reads diagnostic codes. Right now, she was running on high alert, trying to figure out what I knew and how much trouble she was in. No reason. Just making sure my wife is happy. "I'm happy, Gray. Very happy." "Good. That's all I want." After dinner, Lydia disappeared upstairs to catch up on some work emails. I cleaned the kitchen and loaded the dishwasher, whistling an old Johnny Cash tune. When I was done, I went down to my basement workshop and started planning phase 2 of my operation. The beauty of being married to someone who thinks you're stupid is that they never bother to hide things very well. Lydia's laptop password was our anniversary date. Her email password was our cat's name, followed by her birth year. Her phone was protected by a 4-digit code, our house number. It took me less than 10 minutes to access everything. What I found was worse than I'd expected. The affair with Brent had been going on for 3 months, not 2. They'd been using company resources to fund not just hotel rooms, but expensive dinners, weekend getaways, and even a shopping trip to Boston, where Brent had bought Lydia jewelry I'd never seen her wear. But the emails weren't just about logistics and lovey-dovey nonsense. They were also full of plans for the future. Their future. Together. "Once the divorce is final, we can be open about our relationship," Brent had written in an email dated just 4 days ago. "I've already spoken to my lawyer about the best way to handle things. The key is to make sure Gray doesn't get half of everything. If we can prove he's been neglecting the marriage or that his business is failing, we can minimize what you'll have to pay him." Lydia's response was even more enlightening. "Don't worry about Gray. He's so passive he'll probably just sign whatever papers I put in front of him. The man has never fought for anything in his life. Why would he start now? I sat in my basement, reading my wife's plans to divorce me and leave me with nothing, and felt that cold, calculating feeling spread through my chest again. They thought I was passive. They thought I was harmless. They thought I'd just roll over and let them destroy my life. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning, I called Marty and told him I needed him to do me a favor. Sure, boss, what do you need? I need you to follow someone, discreetly. This about your wife? Yeah. Say no more. I've got a cousin who does this kind of thing professionally. Want me to give him a call? No, I want you to do it. You know this town, you know the people, and I trust you. There was a pause. Gray, you sure about this? Once you go down this road, there's no going back. I'm sure. All right then. What do you need me to do? I gave him Lydia's schedule, Brent's license plate number, and a list of places they'd been meeting. I need photos, times, dates, everything documented. You got it, boss. And Gray? Yeah? For what it's worth, I always thought your wife was too good to be true. Turns out I was right, just not in the way I expected. That afternoon, while Marty was conducting surveillance and I was supposed to be working on the Ford Explorer, I got a visitor at the shop. Doug Patterson had been my squad leader in Afghanistan and was now a sergeant with the local police department. He was also one of the few people who knew that Gray the Disappointment had once been Staff Sergeant Delaney, the guy who'd earned a Bronze Star for actions he never talked about. Heard you might be having some domestic troubles, Doug said, settling his considerable bulk against my workbench. Word travels fast in this town. It does when Kelsey Morrison's cousin works dispatch and overhears certain conversations. Doug studied my face. You doing okay, Gray? I'm fine. That's what I'm worried about. You were always too calm under pressure, made you a hell of a soldier, but it also made you dangerous when you finally decided to act. I set down my wrench and looked at my old friend. You warning me about something, Doug? I'm reminding you that whatever you're planning, it needs to stay legal. I can't protect you if you cross certain lines. I'm not planning anything illegal. Good. But Gray, when this is all over, make sure you can live with whatever you've done. After Doug left, I stood in my garage surrounded by the tools of my trade and thought about what he'd said. Could I live with what I was planning? The answer came to me as I remembered Lydia's voice on that dashcam recording, calling me a boring, predictable loser with no spine for confrontation. Yeah, I could definitely live with it. 3 days later, Marty handed me a manila envelope that was even thicker than the one Kelsey had given me. Your wife and her boyfriend aren't exactly subtle, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. They've been meeting almost every day, usually at the Pine Lake Resort, but sometimes at that fancy Italian place downtown. I opened the envelope and spread the contents across my desk. Dozens of photographs, all taken with a telephoto lens that captured every intimate moment. Lydia and Brent holding hands across restaurant tables. Lydia and Brent kissing in the parking lot of the resort. Lydia and Brent entering and leaving hotel rooms. This one's my favorite, Marty said, pointing to a photo of Brent helping Lydia into his Tesla. Look at the timestamp, 2:15 on Tuesday afternoon. Wasn't that when she told you she was in a client meeting? Yeah. And this one. Another photo, this one showing Lydia and Brent in what appeared to be a heated argument outside the resort. From yesterday. Looks like trouble in paradise. I studied the photo more closely. Lydia's face was flushed and angry, while Brent looked like he was trying to calm her down. Whatever they were arguing about, it was serious. Any idea what they were fighting about? Actually, yeah. I got close enough to hear some of it. Marty grinned. Turns out your wife is getting impatient about this whole divorce thing. She wants Brent to leave his wife and move in with her. He's been stalling. Brent's married? Oh yeah. Wife, 2 kids, big house in the suburbs. Apparently he's been telling Lydia that he's working on getting a divorce, but according to what I overheard, he hasn't even talked to a lawyer yet. The irony was almost too perfect. Lydia was cheating on me with a man who was cheating on her. There's more, Marty said. I did some digging into this Brent character. Turns out this isn't his first rodeo. He pulled the same thing at his last job in Portland, had an affair with a subordinate, promised to leave his wife, then transferred to a new company when things got messy. What happened to the woman? Fired for misuse of company resources. Sound familiar? It sounded very familiar. I was starting to see the full scope of what was happening. Brent was using Lydia the same way she thought she was using me. The difference was, Lydia had no idea she was being played. That evening, I decided it was time to have a conversation with my wife. I was waiting in the living room when she got home at 10:30, sitting in my recliner with a beer in my hand and Marty's photographs spread across the coffee table like a deck of cards. "We need to talk," I said when she walked through the door. Lydia glanced at the coffee table and went very still. Even from across the room, I could see the color drain from her face. "Gray, I can explain." "No need. The pictures pretty much tell the whole story." I took a sip of beer and gestured to the couch. "Sit down, Lydia." She sat, her hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl called to the principal's office. For the first time in months, she looked at me like I was someone who deserved her attention. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "About the affair?" "A while. About the plan to divorce me and leave me with nothing?" "Since Tuesday." Her eyes widened. "You read my emails?" "I did." "Interesting stuff. Especially the part where you and Brent discuss how passive and spineless I am. How I'll just sign whatever papers you put in front of me." Lydia straightened up, and I saw a flash of the woman who'd climbed the corporate ladder at her advertising agency. "What do you want, Gray?" "I want to know if there's anything left of the woman I married, or if she's been completely replaced by this person who thinks cheating and lying and stealing are acceptable behavior." "I haven't stolen anything." I picked up one of Kelsey's documents and read from it. Pine Lake Resort, charged to Brent's company credit card as a client meeting. Except there was no client, was there? Just you and your boyfriend having a romantic getaway on your employer's dime. "That's different." "Is it?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like theft. It also looks like fraud, conspiracy, and about half a dozen other things that could get you fired and possibly arrested." Lydia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more like the woman I'd fallen in love with 13 years ago. "I never meant for it to happen this way, but it did happen. The question now is what we do about it." "What do you mean?" I leaned forward, setting my beer on the coffee table next to the photographs. "I mean, you have a choice to make, Lydia. You can end this thing with Brent, come clean about the expense account fraud, and we can try to work on our marriage. Or you can keep going down this path and see where it leads. And if I choose the second option, then you'll find out that your boring, predictable husband isn't quite as harmless as you thought." Something in my tone made her look at me more closely. For the first time since I'd known her, Lydia seemed to realize she was looking at a stranger. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm giving you a choice. That's more than you gave me when you decided to start screwing your boss and planning to take me for everything I'm worth." She stood up abruptly. "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow night. After that, I make the choice for you." Lydia went upstairs without another word. I sat in my recliner, surrounded by evidence of my wife's betrayal, and waited to see what she would decide. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Staying at Fiona's for a few days. Need space to think." Fiona Walsh was Lydia's best friend and biggest enabler, the kind of woman who thought cheating was acceptable as long as you were following your heart. If Lydia was staying there, it meant she'd already made her choice. I called Marty and told him to keep the surveillance going. Then I called Kelsey Morrison. "I think it's time to move to the next phase," I told her. "What did you have in mind? How would you feel about attending a wedding?" "Whose wedding?" "My brother-in-law's. This Saturday. It's going to be quite an event. Tommy Walsh, Lydia's younger brother, was getting married to his college sweetheart in what promised to be the social event of the season. 300 guests, open bar, live band, and enough small-town gossip to fuel conversations for months. It was also going to be the perfect stage for the final act of my plan." "What do you need me to do?" Kelsey asked. "Just bring a laptop and be ready to run a slideshow." "What kind of slideshow?" "The kind that's going to give everyone at that wedding something to talk about for years to come." Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, Perfect weather for a wedding, and even better weather for revenge. I put on my best suit, the navy blue one Lydia had bought me for her company Christmas party 2 years ago, and drove to the Pine Lake Resort. The same resort where my wife had been meeting her lover for the past 3 months. The irony wasn't lost on me that Tommy had chosen this venue for his wedding. Lydia had probably recommended it. I arrived early and spent some time walking around the grounds, familiarizing myself with the layout. The ceremony would be held on the lakeside lawn, followed by cocktails on the terrace and dinner in the main ballroom. Everything was decorated in white and gold, elegant and expensive. Tommy had spared no expense for his big day, which made what I was about to do even more dramatic. Kelsey arrived at noon, carrying a laptop bag and looking nervous. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as we stood on the terrace overlooking the lake. "I'm sure. It's going to cause a scene. That's the point. People are going to get hurt. People are already hurt, they just don't know it yet." The guests started arriving at 2 o'clock. I watched from inside the resort as cars pulled up to the circular driveway and discharged their passengers. Friends, family, co-workers, business associates. Everyone who was anyone in our small town was going to be here. At 2:30, a silver Tesla pulled up and Brent Mallory stepped out, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door for Lydia. My wife looked stunning in a midnight blue dress that hugged her figure in all the right places. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and she was wearing jewelry I'd never seen before. Probably gifts from Brent, purchased with company funds. They walked into the resort together, not quite holding hands, but close enough that anyone watching would assume they were a couple, which I supposed they were. The ceremony was beautiful. Tommy and his bride exchanged vows on the lawn, while 300 guests looked on, dabbing at their eyes with tissues and murmuring about true love and happily ever after. I sat in the back row, watching my wife watch the proceedings. She was sitting next to Brent, their shoulders almost touching, whispering comments back and forth like they were the couple everyone had come to celebrate. During the cocktail hour, I mingled with the other guests, making small talk and accepting condolences about my separation from Lydia. Word had gotten around that we were having problems, but most people assumed it was temporary. A rough patch that we'd work through. "You and Lydia will figure it out," said Mrs. Henderson, who'd taught both Lydia and me in high school. "You're good people. Good people always find their way back to each other." "I hope you're right," I told her, meaning it in a way she couldn't possibly understand. At 6 o'clock, the guests moved into the ballroom for dinner. I'd made sure to arrive early enough to check the seating arrangements. Lydia and Brent were at table 4, along with several other couples from her advertising agency. I was at table 12, with distant relatives and family friends. The separation of the faithful from the unfaithful, you might say. Dinner was served at 7. Prime rib, roasted vegetables, wedding cake that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The kind of meal that cost $100 a plate and made everyone feel sophisticated and important. During the main course, Tommy stood up to make a toast to his new wife. It was sweet and heartfelt, the kind of speech that made people believe in love and commitment and all the things that marriage was supposed to represent. When he finished, other people started standing up to offer their own toasts. Friends, relatives, college roommates. Everyone had something wonderful to say about the happy couple. At 8:30, I stood up. "I'd like to say something," I announced, raising my wine glass. The room gradually fell quiet as people turned to look at me. At the back of the room, I could see the resort's audio-visual technician, a kid I'd paid $50 to help me with a special presentation. Most of you know me as Delaney, Lydia's husband. Some of you might have heard that we're going through a rough patch right now. I paused, letting that sink in. What you probably don't know is why. I could see Lydia at table 4, her face pale and her eyes wide with something that might have been panic. Brent was leaning toward her, whispering something urgently. "Marriage is supposed to be about trust," I continued, "about honesty, loyalty, commitment." About two people who choose to face the world together, no matter what challenges come their way. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. People were nodding, thinking I was about to deliver some heartfelt speech about working through marital problems. Unfortunately, not everyone sees marriage that way. Some people see it as a convenience, a stepping stone to something better, a safety net while they look for their next opportunity. The murmurs were getting quieter. People were starting to sense that this wasn't going where they'd expected. I nodded to the AV technician. I'd like to share something with all of you. A little slideshow about trust, honesty, and the importance of keeping your promises. The lights dimmed and a large screen descended from the ceiling. The first image appeared. Lydia and Brent holding hands across a restaurant table, their faces lit by candlelight. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. This photo was taken 3 weeks ago at Antonio's downtown, I said conversationally. The dinner was charged to Mr. Mallory's company expense account as a client meeting. The next slide showed Lydia and Brent kissing in the parking lot of the Pine Lake Resort. Then another of them entering a hotel room together. Then receipts showing company funds used for personal expenses. Lydia, what is this? Tommy's voice cut through the stunned silence. My wife was on her feet now, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Gray, stop this right now. Stop what? Telling the truth? Showing people who you really are? I clicked to the next slide, an email from Brent to Lydia discussing their plans to minimize my share of our assets in the divorce. You went through my private emails. Lydia's voice was shrill now, desperate. I did. Just like you went through our marriage vows and decided they didn't apply to you. Brent was on his feet too, trying to guide Lydia toward the exit. But she shook him off, her attention focused entirely on me. You bastard! She hissed. You vindictive, pathetic bastard! Vindictive? Maybe. Pathetic? I looked around the room at 300 faces staring back at me in shock and fascination. I don't think so. See, the thing about being underestimated your whole life is that people never see you coming. I clicked to the final slide, a photograph of Brent's wife and children, along with a caption that read, "Another family destroyed by adultery." The room erupted. People were talking, shouting, demanding explanations. Tommy was trying to restore order while his new bride looked like she wanted to disappear. Lydia was crying, whether from anger, embarrassment, or genuine remorse, I couldn't tell. And Brent? Brent was heading for the exit as fast as his expensive shoes could carry him. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, raising my voice to be heard over the chaos, I apologize for disrupting this beautiful celebration. Tommy, Sarah, I wish you a long and happy marriage built on the trust and honesty that every relationship deserves. I set down my wine glass and walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind 300 shocked guests and one very public end to my marriage. In the parking lot, Kelsey was waiting by her car. How do you feel? She asked. Like I can breathe again for the first time in months. What happens now? Now? Now I go home and start figuring out what the rest of my life looks like. I drove home through the quiet streets of our small town, knowing that by tomorrow morning everyone would know the whole story. Lydia's reputation was destroyed. Brent's career was probably over. Their relationship, built on lies and deception, wouldn't survive the scrutiny and judgment that was coming. And me? I was finally free. The fallout from Tommy's wedding was swift and devastating. By Monday morning, the story had spread through our small town like wildfire. The local newspaper even ran a story about it, though they were careful to avoid naming names and focused on the disruption at the social event of the season. Lydia's advertising agency fired both her and Brent on Tuesday. Officially, it was for misuse of company resources. Unofficially, it was because having 2 employees involved in such a public scandal was bad for business. Brent's wife filed for divorce on Wednesday and took the kids to stay with her parents in another state. The house in the suburbs went up for sale by Friday. Lydia moved back in with her parents, something she'd sworn she'd never do after the age of 30. Her mother called me twice to ask if I was willing to work things out, but I politely declined both times. The divorce papers were filed the following Monday. Since Lydia had no job, no savings, she'd spent everything on her affair, and a reputation that made her essentially unemployable in our town, the settlement was straightforward. I kept the house, the business, and most of our assets. She got her car and whatever personal belongings she could fit into it. "This isn't over," she told me when she came to collect her things. "You've destroyed my life out of spite." "I didn't destroy your life, Lydia. You did that all by yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it." "I'll find a way to make you pay for this." "With what?" "You have no money, no job, and no credibility. You're a cautionary tale now, not a threat." She left without another word, driving away in her Honda Civic with everything she owned packed into the back seat. I never saw her again. Brent tried to contact me once, about a month after the wedding. He wanted to talk man to man about what had happened. I told him that if he ever came near me, my business, or anyone I cared about, I'd make sure his next public humiliation would make the wedding incident look like a minor embarrassment. He didn't call back. Kelsey Morrison got promoted to creative director at the advertising agency after Brent's departure. She sent me a bottle of expensive whiskey with a note that read, "Thanks for the career advancement opportunity." Doug Patterson stopped by the shop a few weeks after everything settled down. "You did it," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Destroyed them both without breaking a single law." "They destroyed themselves. I just provided the venue." "That was some venue. 300 witnesses to their humiliation. Seemed appropriate. They'd been humiliating me in private for months. Turnabout is fair play." Doug was quiet for a moment. "Any regrets?" I thought about it. Did I regret the end of my marriage, the public spectacle, the fact that I'd turned into someone capable of such calculated revenge? "No," I said finally. "No regrets." "Good. Because word around town is that you're not the same Gray Delaney who used to let people walk all over him." "I'm not." "That's what I was hoping you'd say." 6 months later, I sold the auto shop to Marty and used the money to start a new business, a private investigation agency specializing in matrimonial cases. Turns out there's a lot of demand for someone who understands how cheating spouses think and operate. My first client was a woman whose husband was having an affair with his secretary. Classic situation, but she wanted proof before she filed for divorce. I got her the proof she needed, along with evidence that her husband had been hiding assets in preparation for leaving her. She got everything in the settlement, and he got a reputation that followed him to whatever city he fled to. My second client was a man whose wife was embezzling money from his business to fund her gambling addiction and her relationship with her bookie. Again, I got the proof, the client got justice, and the cheating spouse got consequences. Word spreads fast in a small town, especially when you're good at what you do. Within a year, I had more clients than I could handle, and a reputation that extended well beyond our little corner of Maine. People started calling me the Disappointment as a joke, a reference to what Lydia's family used to call me. But the nickname took on a different meaning after the wedding incident. Now it meant I was the disappointment that cheating spouses found waiting for them when they thought they were safe. I liked the irony. 2 years after the wedding, I got a call from an unknown number. "Gray, it's Lydia." I almost hung up, but curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want?" "I wanted to apologize. For everything. You didn't deserve what I did to you." "No, I didn't. I've been going to therapy, trying to understand why I made the choices I made. I think I was scared of being ordinary, of having an ordinary life with an ordinary man. I wanted something more exciting, more glamorous." "And how did that work out for you?" There was a long pause. "I'm working as a waitress in Portland, living in a studio apartment above a pizza place. Brent married someone else, a woman he met online who doesn't know about his history. I'm sorry to hear that." And surprisingly, I meant it. Not sorry enough to want her back, but sorry that another human being was suffering the consequences of their bad choices. "Are you happy, Gray?" I looked around my office at the framed certificates on the wall, The photos of satisfied clients, the case files that represented justice served and wrongs made right. Yeah, I said, I am. Good. You deserve to be happy. You always did. She hung up before I could respond. That evening, I drove out to Pine Lake Resort and sat in my truck in the same spot where I'd first watched Lydia meet Brent 3 years earlier. The resort looked the same, but everything else had changed. I thought about the man I used to be, Gray, the disappointment, the boring, predictable loser who let people walk all over him. That man was gone, replaced by someone harder, more calculating, less trusting. Was that a good thing? I wasn't sure, but I knew it was a necessary thing. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. A new client, probably. Someone else whose spouse was cheating, lying, stealing, or all three. Delaney Investigations, I answered. How can I help you? As I listened to another story of betrayal and deception, I smiled. Some people might call what I did revenge. I preferred to think of it as justice. Either way, business was good. And Gray, the disappointment, was finally living up to his name, just not in the way anyone expected.